Let's do it.
Okay, so we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hell in a Handbasket, episode 16, I think.
Yes, finally.
Right.
Number 16.
So this is going to be an interesting episode, at least for me. This one is one that I've been dying to do. So in view of modern day efforts, peace efforts ongoing, like dramatic shift in American foreign policy approach towards Russia and towards Ukraine, thought it'd be a cool idea, an interesting idea to take a look at some of the predictions that the top brass generals, that the retired generals that were that are now part of think tanks and do the rounds on media, what they had to say about the Ukraine war at various points in time, because the predictions were wildly off. So, and I think it should make for interesting viewing. Nanya hasn't watched either of the videos that I've queued today, so we'll see how it goes.
Do we want to set the table with Ursula? I think that she'd be a good way to start because it shows a nice contrast between 3 years ago and today.
Let's do it. I mean, okay, let's do that first.
Military is taking chips from dishwashers and refrigerators. Russian military is taking chips from dishwashers and refrigerators to fix their military hardware because there are no semiconductors anymore. Russia's industry is in tatters.
Even Burrell is like, what is she talking about?
Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe. We will, of course, continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
Whoa, what happened? What happened? They were so confident.
What a difference today makes. Yep. So
they were so confident.
I mean, well, and it also shows the propaganda, I think, because
the term is it's a crude term, but the term that is smelling your own farts, you're huffing your own farts. If you're sitting there in your echo chamber and your propaganda, you start believing your own propaganda, that is a huge problem. That is the last thing you want to do.
Oh yeah, Western hubris knows no equal, right? And she is a perfect example of it.
All right, well, let's do the first one. This is Ben Hodges. The Ukraine will liberate Crimea in 2023.
We have a missile attack going on right now, but so maybe I will have to run. But I hope we can make it still.
Massive missile attack on Ukraine. I'm sorry. I'm feeling a little bit.
This is Euromaidan Press. I'm Serhiy. Today we're going to discuss the Russian-Ukrainian war with the Lieutenant General, the former commanding. You've been extremely accurate with the analysis of the situation in Ukraine.
You've been extremely accurate, he says. Okay, that's setting the table. Keep in mind that this is done with what? What's the outlet that is doing this? This is done with Euromaidan. He said, Euromaidan Press. Another one of those USAID-funded outlets, right?
That's
just
quite
so
the
funny.
earring he's got.
Ukraine over the past 10 months. Early before, you suggested that the Ukrainian army may deoccupy Melitopol and Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine in January 2023. Is that correct?
What I said was that the General Staff will spend the next 2 months pounding away at the Russian logistics and transportation networks leading into Crimea. Of course, there's only two ways to get to Crimea, over the Kerch Bridge or the land bridge, which runs from Rostov through Mariupol and Melitopol into Crimea. And so I think it's part of the preparation for the decisive phase of the campaign, which will be the liberation of Crimea. They're going to spend a lot of time knocking out or disrupting the logistical networks that are important for Crimea. That includes Melitopol and Mariupol. And the Ukrainian forces are already hitting targets inside Melitopol. So to sever that land bridge, that's going to be a critical part that leads or sets the conditions for the liberation of Crimea, which I expect will be finished by the end of August.
Okay, what makes you
Yeah,
think
so-
that the Ukrainian
So
army?
none of
By
that
the end
happened.
of August. By the end
Yeah,
of
so-
this is his extremely accurate analysis. Here we go. We set the
Yeah.
table.
Everything he said was just complete fantasy. I'm sure that was the plan.
End of
but
August 2023.
None of it happened. So
Yes, as we know, famously, none of that happened.
May liberate Melitopol this winter. It seems like a lot of work to do.
Yeah, no, I didn't say that they could liberate Melitopol. What I said is that they will continue to hit
Okay, I get it.
transportation network
Pause-
that
pause
goes
for a
through
sec.
Melitopol, because
I love how even the Ukrainian mouthpiece is questioning Ben Hodges. Like even that guy's like, "You sure about this?"
Sounds
I don't
optimistic,
know."
bro. Yeah, right. And Hodges is going to be on his thing. He's totally committed.
the
But
key,
you know what?
the decisive part.
Those books behind him are really important. Like that shows how smart you are. So
No,
Good
it's
on
part of the whole picture. No, dude, he paid somebody, some interior designer, to create this freaking thing. So he has a place to do interviews in his house that has, pictures of books. If he has a book of his own or something, it's probably prominently featured there. This is interior design stuff. You think he read all those books? Of course not. Maybe he's read some of them.
and that's
It's
why
funny.
I'm not on these shows, because all I got is Star Wars merch. So
Yeah, but I see you're actually into Star Wars merch. Oh, that merch actually is meaningful. It's not just there for show. It's there because it's freaking cool too. Ben Hodges, it's there because that is what is supposed to communicate his perceived personal image, his gravitas, so it's some kind of like intellectual aura. It's some bullshit.
yeah.
That's the decisive part of the entire campaign. In order to do that, they have to be able to disrupt Russian logistics that go through Melitopol.
So, in your opinion, the liberation of Crimea has already started with the operation aimed at disrupting the communication lines in Melitopol and Mariupol, right?
Well, I'm not going to say liberation, but I am going to say the disruption. So with HIMARS, drones, partisans, constant disruption of the transport. That's the key.
Partisans, that's like a soft way of saying terrorists. It's terrorist attacks. I mean, that's what else is that?
Yeah.
So that the Russians cannot move new equipment, people, supplies into Crimea. In other words, the General Staff has to isolate Crimea from external support. That means continuing to block or destroy the Kerch Bridge and continuing to block the land bridge that runs through Mariupol and Melitopol.
Okay, so in this case, we have to expect new Ukrainian strikes at the Crimean Bridge soon, right?
Yeah, I think the Russians, of course, are working as fast as they can to repair that bridge. And I don't know how much longer, but probably several more weeks before it's ready again. And I am sure that the General Staff is
Wasn't it
looking for
like
other
a
ways
couple days?
to
Not even.
Well, they kept doing it again and again. Like they kept trying to find different ways of getting it.
Right,
but
I only recall one attack that was somewhat successful, and it killed
the terrorist attack.
wife.
Yeah, the terrorist.
It killed a husband and wife just driving across the bridge, and they were just civilians. It killed them,
and
it
like the
caused
kids
a little bit
survived.
and it caused a little bit of damage to the bridge, but I don't think it rendered it, unusable for any long period of time or anything like that. Like the Russians just kind of patched it over and went on, but okay.
Yeah, and I hope this is the video where he makes this great prediction that the Crimean Bridge will not survive 2023, but let's see.
revisit that bridge.
How do you think, what weapons did Ukrainian army use to strike at the Crimean Bridge?
I still don't know for sure. I've seen the reports that it was a truck, that it was a drone, that who knows. But whatever it was, I mean, it was devastating and impressive. And it showed, that's what first showed me the vulnerability of Crimea, because Crimea, before this, people talked about it as if it was some fortress, but actually, I think it's a trap. It's a trap for Russian forces there.
Yeah, it's a pretty isolated area, right? If you disrupt the communication lines, so they will be trapped there.
Because also the Black.
Here's what I don't get. The Crimean Bridge isn't that old, and Russia's been dealing in and out of Crimea for hundreds of years. So I do not know what these people are talking about. Even if you took out that bridge, they still had
A land bridge.
Land bridge. They also
Well,
have the sea. So I don't know what this guy is talking about. And I
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
think he does either. So
No, this is what I mean. Like, he's believing his own propaganda, where he's just saying, like, okay, first of all, what makes you think you're going to be able to cut off that land bridge? Second of all, if you cut off that land bridge, what makes you think that the only way that the Russians are going to be able to supply Crimea is going to be by that bridge? Like, there's a lot of just wishful thinking in a way. Where, like, if everything goes right, and I'm just going to assume that everything goes right, what is the saying? The enemy gets a vote. Unfortunately, so. Because the Crimean Bridge is still standing.
Yeah, and I know that we're watching this stuff in hindsight, and we have the benefit of hindsight.
But it was
But
ridiculous
even if we go
then.
back to it just didn't make any sense then. But okay.
Yeah, now it's just apparent. Now, everybody like us who was laughing at Ben Hodges all this time, now we are vindicated because look, this is, you can't hide this. This was an epic failure of analysis.
Fleet is terrified of Ukrainian anti-ship missiles. That's why the Black Sea Fleet hardly even comes out. And so think about that. Ukraine doesn't even have a navy anymore, and yet the Russian Black Sea Fleet does not want to risk losing any more ships. And so they stay very close to Crimea. And so in my view, they're not much help in protecting Crimea.
Yeah, so they mainly launch missiles at Ukrainian cities right now. Okay, so the next question, do you think that we have already passed the point of no return in the Russian-Ukrainian war after the occupation of Kherson?
Well, I would say that Ukrainian forces have achieved irreversible momentum. I mean, there is no going back in where Russia all of a sudden has the big advantage.
Irreversible momentum. There is no going back to where Russia all of a sudden gets an advantage. Let's rewind that.
It's wild. It's just absolutely wild, and it just shows that he knows he's lying, right?
You
Like,
think
Ben
so?
Hodges
I think he must have believed it. No, I think he believed it.
No, I don't think
he was
so.
really doing it. I think he was what we were saying. He was huffing his own flatulence.
I don't know. I think he knows exactly what his role in this is, and his role as a retired general is to be the cheerleading propagandist that he is. So he knows what he's saying is incorrect, but he's lying his way through it because he needs to keep the meat in the grinder, and that's the important thing. So
I don't know how much. I think maybe what it is. You're right. Maybe what it is there's just a little bit of cognitive dissonance, where on the one hand he knows, but I don't know, man. To have this kind of wild prediction, put your face out there as an expert, get talked up as if my predictions are excellent, right? And to make this kind of wild statement, to go so far out of your way, to be not even close. Like, he didn't say the Ukrainians will break through the Russian lines of defense, and so they almost did. They broke through the first one in some places. It was he was so far off.
No, so but you got to understand, like, people do lots of stuff for money, right? And he's got book deals. He's got
what's the saying?
Defense contractor, board memberships.
I don't remember the exact saying. Yeah, but there's a saying that goes like something like along the lines of, it's easy for somebody to believe something when their living depends on it. So
yeah, exactly, right. And I think he knows exactly what he's saying, and like I said,
you say cognitive dissonance. I say he's really deluded himself. I think he was believing it. Maybe there's some cognitive dissonance. I think it's 60-40.
I'm saying that interior decorators for that scene in the background, that costs money, and he needs it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Say that Ukrainian forces have achieved irreversible momentum. I mean, there is no going back in where Russia all of a sudden has the big advantage. I just
there is no going back to Russia all of a sudden has the big advantage. I see.
Turn this around.
I don't see. He doesn't see any way for Russia to turn this around. He doesn't even see a way.
Of course, there's many, many more months of hard fighting. Russians will continue to murder innocent people, and even if they manage to mobilize another 300,000 troops, we already know that they're not going to be effective combat force. They're mass. There's still a lot of people with weapons, but I am unimpressed with what I have seen so far. And
see, I think he believes that. I think he says that, and I think he's selectively filtered out through his bias without even intentionally knowing maybe the information that
you're go ahead.
Well, just the information that runs counter to this narrative, which is what butters his bread, you know, and he's going to push that and regurgitate that.
Oh yeah. I think that I agree with you. I think but you know, I think he's a bit more sinister than you. Maybe it's because I'm older and I've seen the worst in people for longer than you have. But
yeah, what do they say? No matter how cynical you are, no matter how cynical you are, you're not cynical enough. What do they say?
There you go.
The Russians are still not fixed the many problems that they have within their command structure, their logistics. They still are not doing what we call joint operations, where the Air Force supports the ground force. And so as long as the West continues to provide Ukraine what we said we would do, then I think it will not be possible for Russia to change the momentum. They may achieve some small victories in different villages and settlements, but they're not going to change the direction of this war.
So if Russia mobilizes,
they're not going to change the direction of this war.
But the thing about it is, like, when we go back to that time period, like, I remember when Ukraine mobilized and they announced the offensive, they were getting destroyed from day one. It was never an offensive. So I totally have no clue what Ben Hodges is saying. And I just go back to he's just trying to pump him up.
When he's saying, when he goes out there and he says, you know, that these offensives, talking about Kherson and Kharkiv, right? What happened there? In one of them, Russia backed off, right? In Kherson, I think they just backed off. In Kharkiv, they had a fight, but and then ended up backing off, but caused massive casualties on the Ukrainian army. Massive casualties.
Right. But this particular point in time, wasn't this the Avdiivka? That was around the time when Avdiivka fell, right?
I don't think so. I think he's talking about I think this is before the counteroffensive still.
Oh, okay.
So,
for instance, there is no chance they can launch large-scale offensive operations and attack Kyiv again, in your opinion?
No, I'm sure that they are wanting to do that. But first of all, they're not going to find 1 million people. I mean, 500,000 people left Russia back in September rather than demobilized. So they're not going to find that. And even if they did find 500,000 or 300,000 men, they don't have the equipment and the logistics for them, or the trainers or the places. I mean, you can't just magically put hundreds of thousands of people on the battlefield.
This is just sheer projection. This was exactly Ukraine's problem. You conscript a bunch of dudes, throw them onto the front lines. They're turned into meat. They're ground by, you know, they even talk about this high-low mix of troops. High-low mix. The low mix is the fodder for the meat grinder, for the artillery, for the drones.
Well, and I seem to recall at this time, and I don't know if they've ever been redeployed since, because honestly, I kind of gave up following the day-to-day tactical stuff because, you know, I just didn't care. But from what I recall, around this time, didn't Russia have a reserve of I thought it was 200,000 troops or something just across the border, and they had been training there for a year, doing nothing, right? And this goes back to the PMC, the Wagner guys days. They had those troops there even when Wagner was there. So I still don't know what he's talking about. You know, even at this time, Russia had a ton of troops in reserve.
Well, so this is what happened was they didn't have they did. This was the contract troops that were part of the initial force, right, had left, and that was part of the reason, a huge part of the reason for the success of those so-called counteroffensives, right? Then the Russians did a partial quote-unquote mobilization, and I don't remember how many it was, 300,000 or something. I don't remember. And then they and just offered huge contracts, and people are just coming on due to the fact that the Russians really do view it as an existential war. So they only ever did the one partial mobilization. I think that this is after that mobilization already. I think that's why he said, even if Russians mobilize another 300.
That's what I'm saying. That mobilization that you just referred to, I don't think a large chunk of that crew, at least at that time, had ever even gone into combat. And they were just hanging out over on the other side of the border training. And, I'm sure that they've been redeployed since. I don't know for that for sure. But at this time, there was like a couple 100,000 troops doing nothing. So I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's been a while too. I don't remember, but I think he sounds right. It sounds a little bit like probably what would make sense, where they're actually getting training from the Wagner dudes and the other guys that have been on the front, have the up-to-date info on what we need to do to update our tactical approaches and stuff.
I'm still not convinced that Lukashenko is going to actively support this. I think he's not a good person, but he's not stupid, and I think he can see the direction this is going. And I think he has to decide: does he want to be handcuffed to a corpse, which is the Russian Federation, or does he want to preserve his own power and have some flexibility for the post-conflict time? So I'm not convinced he's in. I don't think he wants to see all of his soldiers. I think Belarus has about 10 battalions. I think he knows that they would be destroyed very early if they went into battle against Ukraine. And I don't think the people of Belarus actually want to fight against people of Ukraine either. I just don't see that. But that's not to say that Russia won't try another invasion. But of course, now there's so many intelligence resources that Ukraine has and that your friends have that would be watching for this, and that would be able to see if something like that was happening.
Okay, we were talking about the operation to deoccupy Crimea, which
kind
is
of
closely
strange to
connected
throw Lukashenko in there, right? That was kind of a okay. Don't know.
That just shows you what he's thinking. That's what his thinking is already on the level of like, well, Vladimir Putin's gonna be so desperate. Lukashenko might be the only way that he could possibly be bailed out. And is he gonna do it? I don't think so, because he knows he's gonna get so chewed up. That's kind of what he's saying. So for you to be saying that, for you to be reasoning with that way, it means you're already assuming that it's going to go there, and that to me says that you are deluded. You are being fucking.
It's a lot of cope and hope, right? Because I don't know about you, but in the 30 years or so that Belarus has existed as a country and stuff, I don't ever recall them having any sort of issues with Russia, right? Maybe some, neighborly pissing matches here and there.
We've done what's happened is over the years, our whole thing with Ukraine, we try to do a lot of that with Belarus too. We tried to have Belarusian Nazis and Belarusian like nationalists. We pumped up like the Belarusian kind of dialect, the language, in a way. So that's not. It never really took off that much. It never really took off that much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it never took off like it did in Ukraine or the Baltics or anything like that. So, and Putin and Lukashenko, in my mind, they've always had a pretty strong relationship. So, it's
Lukashenko is sneaky. Lukashenko is sneaky. He gets what he wants to. But Vladimir Putin, basically, we can see now. We could look back at his legacy. Go like, this guy. He did exactly what they always said about him back in the day. That he knows how to play a weak hand. And he did. Like, look at this little bit by little bit. He's won the war against NATO. This is what the shocking thing to me. Like, I don't know if I'm just going to try to make this tangent short. Like, in a way, as a Russian American, this is the conflict I've been looking forward to in my life the most, right? It's like Chekhov's gun going off. How is this going to be resolved? This whole thing where the NATO encroachment, they're trying to surround the Russians, they're trying to get at Ukraine's and Russia's stuff, how is this going to go? Because we never took a break. We were always going forward and never taking a step backward. We were always trying to do and it went off in a way, right? We can see what happened. We armed Ukraine to the teeth. Ukraine was already a massive army. They started the war with 6,500 tanks. That's crazy. That's a not massive amount of tanks. That's more tanks than Germany has. That's probably more tanks than anybody in Europe has, except for Ukraine, except for Russia, right? So this was a massive army with insane, very good air defense, right? With a relatively modern and a relatively large air force that was relatively well trained. There was a lot of this was like they were easily bigger than Germany's army, than France's army, you know, easily. A fight between Ukraine and Turkey, Ukraine would probably have kicked Turkey's butt, I think. But anyway, I think that it's crazy that we can see this is what they were planning. This is in the process of Chekhov's gun going off, you know. How did all that resolve? And this is the story of that.
To Ukrainian strikes at Russian communication lines in Melitopol and Zaporizhia region at large. But how about Kherson Oblast? Will it be more difficult for the Ukrainian army to launch offensive operations in Kherson region on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, as crossing the river is an obstacle, and Russians have already created fortifications in that area? How do you see the developments in that direction?
Yeah, that's a good point. First of all, the Ukrainian General Staff has impressed me with how thorough and methodical and professional they are. And so they will not waste people's lives doing
Remember this, because now what are they saying? That the Ukrainians are bumbles, and they didn't misuse the equipment, and they did a bad job, et cetera, et cetera. Here, Ben Hodges is saying these guys are on the level. I think you're muted if you're talking. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'll say one thing about the interviewer. He's asking good questions, right? And like maybe he unconsciously kind of sees how all this is going, but like in hindsight, he's asking Hodges good questions.
Yeah, you're right. Ben Hodges isn't just putting himself on the spot. He's being asked questions that force him to basically make these wild ass predictions.
Right. And now, which we know now in hindsight, he looks foolish. But even at the time, like they're talking about establishing a beachhead on the eastern side. We know now that was tried, and they lost all sorts of troops trying to do it multiple times, right?
Yeah.
And they could never establish any sort of strong force.
All right.
a river crossing anywhere where they haven't done all the correct preparations. So, number one. Number two, if you think of the direction of Kherson as the right wing of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, and then the fighting that's up in Luhansk and Donetsk as the left wing, all right, everything working towards the isolation and then liberation of
Actually,
Crimea.
the other way, but
The forces that are in Kherson right now, they don't have to cross the river. I mean, they're in place where they can launch long-range strikes against Russian defenses. And I've seen video of the from Ukrainian drones of these trenches that are on the east bank of the Dnieper River. I mean, these are like open, easy to see, no overhead cover. These are terrible defenses. And of course, the people that'll be in them are the untrained, recently mobilized soldiers. That's who they'll put there. And so when and where Ukraine is ready to cross the river, if they decide to do it anywhere there, you know, they will have done all the right preparations, I'm confident. So when it's time, it'll be time. But of course, I don't know. It's not isolated. Think about what's happening in Kherson will be connected to what's happening up in from Donetsk and Luhansk.
What does Ukraine need to win this war sooner and get back all occupied territories under Ukrainian control? What weapons does Ukraine lack to achieve that?
Well, of course, the three things.
An excellent question, right? Like, what weapons do we need to accomplish this task, right? This guy's been saying all along it's possible.
I think that would be most useful are exactly what President Zelensky has asked for. The longer range ATACMS, you know, that has 300-kilometer range that could already be hitting targets in Crimea now. I think tanks like Abrams tanks or Leopards, these, of course, there's challenges for these, but still these are capabilities that would be very useful when it's time for offensive, you know, for the next time there's a offensive operation. And then I think the whether it's drones or manned aircraft, to provide long-range capability to hit targets deep inside the Russian-controlled areas, as well as to be able to go after the bases from which these missile attacks are being launched.
Yeah, so talking about this escalation, right? This is before I think we armed them with the tanks and with the long-range attack missiles. So he's like, yeah, this is what we need to win the war. And look, they got that, right? They got those things, and they did not win the war.
Russian officials hinted at the possible use of nukes against Ukraine if Ukraine attacks Crimea. Ukraine targets Russian military infrastructure in Crimea on a regular basis now, and nothing happens. Seems like Russia is running out of options to respond. How do you think why the US government refuses to give long-range ATACMS missiles to Ukraine?
So that ended up happening. So let's ignore it. Like I was saying, they ended up getting them.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz made it clear that Germany will send tanks to Ukraine only if other NATO countries will do the same. The question is, what is the best option for Ukraine? American tanks.
Just pointing out that Olaf Scholz got played. He was a sucker. We gave how many Abrams? Dozens. He gave it. They gave substantially more. They gave scores of Leopards, different kinds. So
tanks Abrams or German tanks Leopard. And is it possible for the United States to send a small batch of American tanks Abrams to Ukraine to urge Germany to do the same?
Whether it's German tanks or American tanks or French or whatever, Ukrainian soldiers will learn how to operate them very quickly. There's no doubt about that. So it's not
pointing this out. He's making the similar point a second time that the Ukrainians are very good at actually using the equipment, and they've been learning how to use the equipment quickly and learning how to employ it in ways that, unexpectedly good ways.
a training issue. It will take time to build up the maintenance support for Abrams or Leopards, but don't let that be an excuse. Just get on with it. Finally, I think there is some kind of a psychological or policy reason. The idea of tanks being perceived as offensive weapons that might lead to some unintended consequence, which I just don't understand. I completely disagree with that thinking. I have been an advocate for providing these things for a long time, and eventually, what always happens, we hesitate, then we do it, then we do it, then we do it, and there's never a escalation from the Russian side, because the Russians know that we are self-deterring ourselves, and they just have to mention the possibility, and people are overreacting to it.
See, I just love this. Like, he just admits it. Like, hey, why do we respect the Russian red lines? Why do we have to do this? I feel like we should not have to do this. Let's not,
Well, it's just Western hubris, right? We're restraining ourselves. We're basically letting these two children play it out, but we can step in and separate the kids anytime we want, right? He's whatever. He's just delusional.
Yeah.
Okay, the last couple of questions. Let's talk about Bakhmut, which is the hottest spot on the war map these days. How much do Russian attacks on the city reduce the capability of the Ukrainian forces to launch counteroffensive operations in other areas this winter? How the winter campaign may look like for both sides, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, it's impressive what Ukrainian soldiers have accomplished in and around Bakhmut, and what a huge price Russian soldiers are paying for the vanity of Prigozhin. I mean, that's what this is about, I believe. And of course, he doesn't care how many of his soldiers are killed, since they were released from prison, they're untrained. I mean, all kinds of different.
There's been a very, very interesting video that released by History Legends where he talks about this Battle of Bakhmut and this myth about the massive human wave tactics of the Wagnerians. So it's worth a watch. It's not that long, but I don't think we'll have time to break that down. We're almost done with Ben Hodges. The Petraeus one is going to be shorter.
People, so at some point that they run out of bodies, but there's no strategic or significant operational advantage for the Russians if they capture Bakhmut. It would be fun. They could finally say, we finally captured something, we finally liberated something. But in terms of real significance, I don't see it. I can't see it. It may be there, but I can't see it. I'm more interested in what Ukrainian forces are doing other places, like direction.
I bet you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's
Let's
one.
not talk about Bakhmut.
For Ukraine to enter the negotiations with Russia have resumed after Ukraine's successful counteroffensive in Kherson,
Ooh, ooh.
most recently voiced by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley.
Milley.
They are refused by Ukrainian officials. In your opinion, what would be the right time for Ukraine to enter the negotiations with Russia, if any?
After Crimea is liberated.
Oh,
Okay, so
there you
you
go.
said-
Look at that. Look at that. After Crimea is liberated. See, if you're saying that, you are. That is. They always talk about Russia's maximalist objectives. That is beyond maximalist. That is absurd. That's your stance. After you take Crimea from the Russians, that's when you should start the negotiations.
That Crimea would be liberated in August. Do you still believe?
By the end of August, that's correct.
2023.
End of
right?
August.
End of August
2023.
2023.
So, and
Yeehaw.
one last question: how long do you think this war will last?
That I don't know, but Ukraine will never be secure or safe or able to rebuild its economy as long as Russia controls Crimea. So that's the key. Once you have Crimea back, then I think the other things will. There will be so much internal friction inside the Kremlin that they will start eating themselves.
Okay, thank you for this interview.
So you're the man. You heard these predictions.
I was reading about this whole Russia's imminent collapse just today, and they talk about today. They were talking about Russia's. Oh, let me just finish this. I want to show you something actually before we start into Petraeus.
Let's do it.
But I just want to, put a bow on Mr. Hodges here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we got to get out of this whole Western narrative that all the other countries of the world are in such precarious positions that they're about to collapse at any minute, right? Like I was reading just today that the Treasury Secretary, I think it was Scott Bass, and he was talking about, well, they're going to pressure the world to get oil down to $45 a barrel. And at $45 a barrel, the Russian oil machine or war machine won't be able to work, and the Russian economy is going to collapse. And I'm like, what are these people talking about? Like, they can't control the price of oil, number one. Number two, even if they did, and even if the price of oil went down to $45, Russia could easily absorb this. You know why? They don't have any debt. Same thing with China. Like, I read about President Xi. Like, when you read the Western media, it's like President Xi wakes up every day and he takes a piss. And then everything else, the rest of his day, he's just trying to manage like China from collapsing. He's like plugging holes here. He's got some duct tape up here. Like, he's just trying to micromanage everything. It's like, what are these people talking about? I don't get it. But anyway,
it's like they believe. It's like, okay, well, so I don't know, Nanya. It's people really believe this kind of this level of absurdity a lot of the times. It's like you've convinced yourself. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, Ben Hodges knows better, not should know better. You're right. He must know better. But for him to come out and say what he was saying in 2023, that shows a level of bias, delusion, cognitive dissonance, what have you. It shows that this is a level of analysis that this individual does. This is what he is. He is severely limited by whatever you want to call that, bias, whatever. Because, now I was saying, that was absurd then. Even then, that was absurd. Even then, he was already wrong about what happened in Kherson and what happened in Harkov. Already back then, right? And people that were paying attention, people that follow DPA, people that follow Military Summary Channel, people that follow the Duran, people that follow any independent news, or even just follow the foreign propaganda instead of just our propaganda, would have had a different picture than this. Anyway, here's Petraeus on ABC.
Also desperate. He
Hold on.
is losing.
Before we
And
get
the-
into this clown,
Oh, that's
can I
right. You were
show
going
you
to.
something from Hodges? Yeah,
Yep.
just let's fast forward 3 years. This past week, Ben Hodges was on Piers Morgan.
Dun, dun, dun,
And
dun, dun.
yeah, I'll put a link into the description when we post this. But if you guys haven't seen the Piers Morgan with Hodges on it, it is fantastic. He gets absolutely eviscerated by these guys. So and he's just sat there with his dick in his hand because he's got nothing left. So let me just show you a little clip of that. Now I'm not
All
the
right.
technical wizard, so I'll probably screw this up.
You could either send me the link, or you could do
I
what's it
think I
called?
got it.
Or you could just share the video. Either one works. It's so capricious, dude. StreamYard is so capricious. Maybe we got to explore other streaming situations. All right, what are we doing here?
Can you see?
This. Let me see here. Maybe first I have to get rid of this. Here we go, and then this. Okay, there's no volume though.
No volume?
There is no volume, no. You can just send me the link to that. Just copy the link and literally put it in private chat, and I'll play it.
Okay. Okay, we'll play it at the end.
We'll play it. Okay, or that.
Okay,
whatever.
move over to Petraeus and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in the meantime, just send it to me over a private chat. I'll queue it up afterwards. Okay.
Sure. All right.
Oh shit. I have to
All right, on to Mr. Petraeus.
Here we go.
It is significant, but it's also desperate. He is losing. And the battlefield reality he faces is, I think, irreversible. In other words, over the last 7 months, President Zelensky and Ukraine have mobilized vastly better than has Russia. In other words, Ukraine has recruited, trained, equipped, organized, and employed forces incomparably better than Russia has. And the reality facing Russia now is that Ukraine, a country a third the size of Russia, has a bigger, much more effective army on the ground and other assets as well. All of this, of course, supported by the arsenal of democracy. The United States now up to $17 billion, over another billion announced this week, in military arms, ammunition, and materiel, and also supported by the other NATO countries and other Western countries around the world. So he faces a situation that I think, again, is irreversible. There's no amount of shambolic mobilization, which is the only way to describe.
So this is another theme from around the same time but from Petraeus, where remember when Ben Hodges was saying, I don't see how they turned this around, is what he was saying.
It. No amount of annexation, no amount of even veiled nuclear threats can actually get him out of this particular situation. He announced the annexation, and he's already lost a really critical element in that, a critical city that would have been a very key supply hub had they been able to go farther.
He's right about that, I think.
And that's just going to continue. He's going to continue to lose on the battlefield. And at some point, there's going to have to be recognition of that. At some point, there's going to have to be some kind of beginning of negotiations, as President Zelensky has said, will be the ultimate end. And at some point, by the way, as well, I strongly agree with the idea of Ukraine becoming part of NATO. Although, as Senator Rubio noted, let's make sure that the battlefield goes well first.
But by irreversible, you mean that Russia cannot
They
win
cannot.
this war.
There's nothing he can do at this point. Again, to even
The
take,
losses have been staggering.
they have been many multiples in 7 months what Russia lost in nearly a decade in Afghanistan. Many multiples. And again, they're losing on the battlefield, and it's going to continue. The only question really is, when do you start to see not just individual soldiers or small units surrender, but when you start to see larger units crumble, crack, and perhaps actually collapse. And I think that will be coming. And then the question's,
he's predicting
It's actually
a
coming
Russian
right now in
collapse.
Kursk. Yeah, it's actually coming right now in Kursk, and it's not Russian soldiers, it's Ukrainian. There's about 6,500 of them surrounded right now as we speak.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
See, this is another guy, another general, putting his face out in public, making these predictions, acting very serious, saying very similar things to what Ben Hodges was saying. This is wishful thinking, cognitive dissonance, copium, whatever you want to call it. I guess I'm not the analyst, not trying to analyze
straight up propaganda. I'll just call it that.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's what it is. They know that they're part of the propaganda war, and they are trying to be the best boys that they can and do their due diligence. And that's why they don't care whether or not what they are saying is accurate, because who cares? Doesn't matter. They know that they're always going to be um, their bread is buttered not by being correct. It's by pushing the line to the military industrial complex line. Anyway, let's continue.
For President Zelensky will be, do we retake that little part of the Donbass that was controlled by the separatists since 2014, and what about Crimea? And when we have some kind of negotiation with Russia. And of course, by the way, in response to this annexation, Russia got hit by 100,000 more individual, personal, and other sanctions, showing that the West still has more that can be done to Russia. It can still get worse for Putin and for Russia, and even the use of tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield won't change this at all.
And do you take the threat? I mean, you have to.
You have.
So this is what I love. They always say it's the Russians that are threatening us with tactical nukes, but it's obvious. Never seems to be the Russians. It seems to be Ben Hodges. Yeah, maybe Vladimir Putin might go out there and say, "Hey guys, like we have weapons and we are changing our nuclear doctrine, like they did, right? To reconsider how we're going to be using them, et cetera, et cetera." But this is different than what these guys are pointing to. The ones that are actually constantly shouting the nuclear boy that cried wolf, right, is these guys.
To take the threat seriously. And we talked about
precedent set by the United States.
You have to take that seriously. And Jake Sullivan has publicly stated that the U.S. has communicated to Russia what would happen in response to that.
And what would happen?
Well, again, I have deliberately not talked to Jake about this. I mean, just to give you a hypothetical, we would respond by leading a collective effort that would take out every Russian conventional force that we can see and identify on the battlefield in Ukraine and also in Crimea and every ship in the Black Sea.
So it would bring America and NATO into the war. It would be an Article 5 situation.
Not Article 5 because they're not part of NATO, but it would be a U.S. and NATO response to something that is absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to rewind that.
Battlefield in Ukraine.
This is how crazy. This is where they were at. They were thinking that Ukraine would inevitably be.
Also in Crimea and every ship in the Black Sea.
So it would bring America and NATO into the war. It would be an Article 5 situation.
Not Article 5 because they're not part of NATO, but it would be a U.S. and NATO response to something that is absolutely.
I mean, the radiation would extend into NATO countries. It effectively would be an attack on NATO.
Yeah, and perhaps you can make that case. The other case is that this is so horrific that there has to be a response. It cannot go unanswered. But it doesn't expand. It's not nuclear for nuclear. You don't want to, again, get into a nuclear escalation here, but you have to show that this cannot be accepted in any way. Well, he's trying to.
Those are those security guarantees that Zelensky desperately wanted.
Any way that he can, in a way to appear threatening, to be threatening, to try to get Europe to crack. He thinks he can outsuffer Europe, if you will. The Russians have outsuffered Napoleon and the Nazis and so forth, but I don't think he's going to outsuffer Europe. Europe's going to have a tough winter. There's going to be a very reduced.
This is funny. This trope about the Russians being willing to suffer harder. I don't know. I would say that maybe it's not even necessarily all that wrong. And maybe it's not the way that Americans look at it in terms of suffering. I think it's a little bit different it's more of a understanding of personal social responsibility in a way that Americans it's a great quote for, was it John F. Kennedy to say, don't ask what your government can do for you, ask what you can do for your government, right? And it's mind blowing. Yeah. But I think Russians are a little bit wired that way already. So when you're saying suffering, what they're just willing to not do things for personal benefit sometimes that are going to hurt the community they're in. And it also, that just has to do with just slightly different culture. The Russians kind of have a little bit more of that feel of social responsibility. I don't know.
Well,
I guess from our perspective, we can look at that and call that why are they willing to put up with more crap, a lot of the time.
I go back to, I think that the Russians have a sense of national identity and national pride that we just don't have anymore. I think we may have had it at some point, but that's long gone now.
We definitely did, and we definitely still do. Listen, I'm proud to be an American.
I don't think
it's
so.
Just that we've lost our way in a lot of ways, I feel like, but I don't know.
I don't think so. I think we've lost a lot of our various national identities in the West over the last 30 years as everything has been globalized. When you have leaders going around talking about how they're no longer, they're citizens of the world and stuff like that, you lose your national identity. The Russians have never lost that. The Chinese have never lost that. And
There's a
why,
lot of Russian liberals and Russians that view themselves as citizens
Sure.
of the world. There's a lot of that too.
But it's very small compared to the rest of the population. Whereas here, I think it's a lot larger, and we're just losing ourselves, right? And the other thing that doesn't help too is when you live in countries and societies that are on the decline economically. Well, it's kind of harder to grip to it. So in the West, failure is everything around us right now is setting us up for failure. And, and our leaders seem to be hell bent on getting us there. So it is what it is.
All right. It's a little bit less than a minute to go.
Natural gas, but they'll get through it. And I don't think they'll crack on the issue of support for Ukraine. I mean, does Putin have to worry about opposition? He does. This is why he didn't declare even the partial mobilization until just now. He was hesitant. And of course, now it's too late because he can't generate enough capable replacements and forces and units to plug the gaps. They're just going to continue to try to reestablish new defensive lines in the east. They're going to lose Kherson in the south, and eventually you're going to see some puncture in Donetsk and Zaporizhia in the center south as well. So again, they're in a very, very difficult situation. Reportedly, more Russian men have left the country than have actually been conscripted.
Okay, so we can see that also aged like fine wine, or maybe like fine milk that became cheese, like cheese, fine wine that became cheese, basically. Anyway, what am I doing? I'm skipping this.
Yeah. Okay.
45 minutes in.
Yeah, go guys. I highly recommend if you haven't watched this full thing, it's really good. Jeffrey Sachs does a good job. But yeah, start at around the 45-minute mark. They really start to gang up on him here.
Yeah, I think I've seen this. This guy right here kind of really, in my opinion, kind of shits the bed a little bit. He goes aggro. I think he goes overboard and feels bad, but it feels like he has to go forward. You know what it is? It's freaking Scott Horton's fault, because Scott Horton went on there and what did he say? He said he called somebody an idiot or something, and it's since then and it kind of went viral. And oh man, this guy I think flops it. I was cringe. I thought anyway. Let's go.
Parliament voted overwhelmingly to approve a resolution affirming the legitimacy of Zelensky's stay in office, asserting the constitutionality of deferring the presidential election while the country's at war. The 268 Parliament members present voted unanimously to approve the resolution, while 12 other MPs were not present during the session. So that seems to me to be a very clear democratic mandate by the elected
officials. Slow it down a bit?
To enforce not have
it's kind of crackling.
An election.
No, I see.
And I think this is worth it. I like when Hodges gets his ass ripped open.
I think I know what it is too. I have an entire situation with my internet now. Hopefully it'll be there soon. Okay, here we go. And yeah, hopefully I won't have to suffer with but slow internet for much longer.
It's over. Well, some of us may not like the fact that Ukrainian martial law includes the suspension of elections, but that is the law. And then the fact that...
How is it? Is it better?
Not really, but I guess we'll just suffer through it.
Really? Damn, that sucks. Here, let me reload it maybe, and...
don't worry about it. Let's play it through.
Whether it's
all right. Well, I just hope it's serviceable. All right, let's go.
Affirming the legitimacy of Zelensky's stay in office, asserting the constitutionality of deferring the presidential election while the country's at war. The 268 Parliament members present voted unanimously to approve the resolution, while 12 other MPs were not present during the session. So that seems to me to be a very clear democratic mandate by the elected officials of Ukraine to endorse not having an election until the war is over. Well, some of us may not like the fact that Ukrainian martial law includes the suspension of elections, but that is the law. And then the fact that the Rada made the decision to
vote and give that sort of public endorsement, to me, that's compelling. Now, I do want to say, give Dave Smith credit. I finally heard him say something today that I agreed with. This war could have been
Years.
if we, West, led by the United States, had responded appropriately after Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, if we had responded appropriately after they invaded Ukraine in 2014, and that's not a game. I mean, the whole world saw Russia invade Ukraine in 2014, and we did nothing when they jumped over the Obama red line in Syria. So this war is a result of failed deterrence. And trying to explain deterrence and spend money for deterrence is always a tough sell, because you have to convince taxpayers and voters and legislators of what the risk is and why you have to do it. That's hard, but it is much cheaper, obviously, to do that, to have successful deterrence, as we did for over 70 years after the Second World War, versus dealing with the failed deterrence we're dealing with right now. I think that for Andrew, I would just offer, as
I came home one day from third grade, and
oh my gosh, I'm using a browser that is like anonymous, so I'm not logged into my like normal account, so I have to watch advertisements. All right.
I'm pretty sure you know this. Yeah, the amount of money, the 120 to 180 billion, depending on what you include in that amount, it's clearly not 350. But the amount of money that the United States has spent or contributed towards helping Ukraine, the overwhelming majority of that money was spent in the United States. It's not pallets of ammunition, of money.
That famous point that got made over and over and over again. When this war is over, I've always said that the Ukrainians are going to be so mad at the Americans. They're going to hate the Americans. But the thing is that Americans who have had like so many poor experiences with Ukrainians over the internet and in person are probably not going to be too fond of the Ukrainians as well. So we'll see.
But not only that, like that whole argument, I don't think the majority of Americans would ever agree with that, because like when you have some, ghoul like Lindsey Graham, trumpeting out there and parading himself out and saying all the money that we're spending on these weapons are being spent right here and we do the weapons and they do the dying and all that.
Well,
like the majority of Americans, they don't think that way. Like they don't want to be, warmongers.
Well, what they're trying to do is they've decided that their biggest argument that poses the biggest threat that they have to address is the argument that let's stop spending the money over there in Ukraine, let's spend the money here. So that's why they always repeat this whole point about the money is spent here.
Yeah, and I get that. And I think that, if you were to make the argument, we're going to, spend money to build up our own defense stocks or whatever, most Americans, oh, great, made in America. But when you start talking about warmongering and these proxy wars, and we're going to, fund these people to go march off to their deaths, I don't think most Americans are on board with that. Not the ones I know.
Yeah.
Like, morally, it just doesn't sound right,
My experience, more and more Americans care less and less. Probably because the war didn't go super well. If we'd heard more news about how the Russians are really getting it, I think we'd see more of it. But because it's not going super well, I think that's just my observation. Anyway, let's continue.
They're loaded onto a C-17 and then delivered into Ukraine. It's money that is spent replacing or buying ammunition, refurbishing old equipment that is then loaned or given to Ukraine. And of course, there are no U.S. troops in Ukraine except for those officers that are assigned to the embassy in the Office of Defense Cooperation, whose task is to make sure accountability of every javelin, every artillery round, every set of binoculars. Oh, you can shake your head if you want to. That's a fact. So
why not just stop pretending?
Yeah. I don't know. So you thought this was cool. I thought this was a bit cringe, but maybe let's see on second watch through how it'll be. Does it still sound like shit?
Yes, but we'll power through it.
God damn it, dude, that sucks. Maybe there's one thing I can do about that. 1 second. Let me go into.
Maybe stop your cam while you're doing it. That might help.
Oh, that could help as well. Yeah, with 2 seconds though. There's one thing I'll do. 2 things. I'll do this and I'll do that. First thing I need to do is I need to find.
Don't worry about it. I say we just power through it. We only got a couple minutes.
All right, fine.
That we don't have United States Special Forces on the ground right this second. We don't have CIA agents all over Ukraine right this second. Why don't you just stop pretending? Because it's nonsense, and we all know it's nonsense. This is the way. Hang on. This is the way it's been going for a long time. And when you talk about, well, Andrew, what we're actually doing is we're spending a whole bunch of money on refurbishing equipment here instead of buying new equipment to send over there. So what? So you're still spending tons of my money on something I don't care about to send over to a nation which is corrupt as hell. So can we just stop BSing each other for a second? Yes, the United States has boots on the ground there. Yes, we have special forces units there. We have CIA agents there, and we would be fools to pretend we don't.
It's an interesting argumentative style that you had, and when people start calling me names,
So like he's a general, right?
Oh, let him go. Keep going, because now Andrew's going to destroy him.
I didn't call you any names, sir.
I
didn't call you any names.
Okay.
What was the name that I called you?
I think the key is this idea of trying to
By tone. You just don't like tone. Maybe a little tone policing. Getting worked in there. Maybe that southern drawl. Oh, we try to make yourself sound logical because you have it. Doesn't work so well on me. Because you can't gaslight me with this stuff. It's nonsense.
Fucking right.
On there.
Yes.
Yes, we've been boots on the ground there probably since the beginning. Yes, we're spending $100 billion plus on equipment that we then either send over there. And by the way, there's hidden money going over there too. This is such nonsense. Just stop gaslighting the American people. Stop it. We're not stupid. We've seen this on repeat so many times now. So many times.
General, respond.
the idea of ending the war, of course, is exactly what we would like to do, but it needs to be an end that is sustainable. And I think President Zelensky understands that he can't just sign or accept an end to the war where Russia will wait for us to lose interest, because we always lose interest. And then they pick right back up.
Pause that. Did you hear that?
At least he admits that. At least he says
At
it.
least he admitted it. At least he admitted it. We always do lose interest. I love how this Andrew guy lights up the smoke mid thing. And I also love how he takes Hodges to task, because what Hodges tried on him was a classic deflection move, and he didn't buy into it all, and he called him out on it and made him look foolish. When Hodges was like, well, where I come from, you try to, throw insults, and he came back rightly so. I didn't call you anything. What are you talking about?
No, but then he all of a sudden started doing personal insults. He went from that to saying, you're coming in with your southern drawl, trying to do something. You're not.
That's exactly what Hodges. That's exactly what Hodges was doing, though, right? Hodges is a character. He's a fucking character. Right?
Well, I think he's very. Anytime you listen to Hodges speak, I think that he's very aware of how to speak in a propagandistically acceptable way. Like he speaks intelligently, right? He does a lot of public speaking and personal speaking tactics. Like he's been coached well on how to do this. He obviously knows what he's doing.
Yeah, but this Andrew guy is better than him, because this Andrew guy is tearing.
Well, this Andrew guy is. I think he's trying to
know
pull
this Andrew guy at all.
I don't
know this Andrew guy, what he's all about, but I think he's doing a good job putting Hodges in his place.
All right.
With a resumption of the conflict after we have left, after turned their back. And so I think it's reasonable to expect Ukrainians to want some sort of guarantee, whether that's continued aid, continued equipment, or presence. They haven't. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Obviously, I would prefer in NATO. We get better the day they join NATO. It's not going to happen anytime soon, especially if the United States.
This whole thing where he interrupts him. Of course you don't. It's, for me, that's a little.
willing to do it. The Biden
I said
administration
that, not Andrew.
and how do you end it when your partner on the other side, negotiating partner on the other side of the table is Vladimir Putin? I mean, there's no reason to have confidence that they will live up to any agreement because there's nothing in their history. And I do appreciate that Andrew likes my North Florida accent.
You know,
Sorry, were you saying something?
no, I was just shaking my head at this Hodges clown and Piers.
No, he's trying to deal with it. He's very image conscious. He's very what he's trying to do is he's trying to be like, I'm above this all. I see what you're doing, and you know what? I'm going to be classy about it. He's trying to play it off. I think that he's probably personally a little bit put off because I think that he doesn't get talked to like this very often. I think he gets talked to with a lot of deference.
And that's why it looks so good on him, because this Andrew guy is taking him to the woodshed and he doesn't know how to react.
Right.
I want to bring it down. We've got,
I never quite understand this argument that seems to just logically fall apart, that we can't end the war because the war might pick up at some point in the future, and therefore if we don't have a perfect guarantee that I mean, I don't know, I've heard the entire time through this war, including on your show, Piers, that if Putin was successful in Ukraine, then he was going to move on Poland, right? Like, this is what Joe Biden kept saying. This was the official, fear mongering of this war. And so, if you're telling me that even NATO membership isn't a guarantee, then yes, we never have a perfect guarantee. But you also don't have a guarantee.
Wait, did turning the cam off do anything?
Not really, but I think we're pretty much. I think the point that we've made.
Let's hear Dave Smith finish up, because Dave Smith talks a lot of sense about this issue, I think.
From many government in the world, that doesn't mean that ending a war isn't still a positive. And I just want to go back to what was brought up initially. The idea that this was a case of failed deterrence, and that if only we had deterred Vladimir Putin sooner, then we could have avoided this whole thing. I mean, let's just kind of quickly overlook the last 20 years of U.S. foreign policy in Europe. We've expanded NATO all the way to Vladimir Putin's borders. We constantly floated out the idea for years that we would include Ukraine at some point, give them full membership. We said point blank in 2008 at the Bucharest summit that we were bringing Georgia and Ukraine into NATO before Russia ended up going to war with Georgia there. And then look, Piers, we've done this before on the show too, right? But just imagine, if you can, have a little bit of strategic empathy and put yourself in the Russian shoes. If Russia, let's say the Soviet Union had never collapsed, in the Soviet Union,
I think this is an important point.
$100 million into a Mexican street protest that overthrew a democratically elected government, and they have been saying for years they were going to bring Mexico into their military alliance. And then when the new government came up, they recognized them immediately and started arming them, as Donald Trump foolishly bragged about the other day with Zelensky in the Oval Office. Piers, do you think Americans would feel that was deterrence, or do you think we might view that as a provocation? It's just Donald Trump's logic, Dave.
Yeah, stop using logic, Dave. I think Dave makes a much more devastating point, because he's saying, think about it. Just use strategic empathy. You don't have to like the Russians, but think about it from their perspective. And he's so right. This is what General Hodges apparently has a hard time doing. So I guess, how much more is there to go for this video?
I think the Andrew guy gets into him at another point, but it's all good.
Yeah, he does. There's another point. I think another point that went viral.
Rather than me trying to answer a logical question, let me get Jake to respond to that.
So, the first thing that he said, what is the concern if Russia takes Ukraine?
Oh, forget this guy. He's terrible.
Take the city across.
Yeah, dude, this guy's a freaking idiot.
What is the hack see?
Nothing he says is useful.
Thinks or feels Russia is not a great power. Russia has an economy the same size roughly as Spain. Do you think
perfect example?
Business of trying to be a world empire, and we're going
it's
broke.
The same old talking points. Look at this guy. Look at how pissed off he is.
Empire, and dude, listen. We are in the business of trying to be a world empire, and we're going broke. We're $30 trillion in debt because we can't afford to do it. We've blown $8 trillion in the last 20 years.
Why is Donald Trump talking about invading Greenland? Why is Donald Trump talking about invading Canada? Why is Donald Trump talking about annexing Canada? Why is he talking about ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip? That is empire.
You lost my
pushing for America to be a global empire.
Red herring.
Yep.
Oh, right, right, right. Like, okay, this guy Mark spends all day arguing with strippers and OnlyFans girls. Can speak up. I don't know. Make better arguments than you do, bro. It's not my fault.
Bro, they make better arguments than you do, bro. And you know what? That's almost certainly true. It's hard to make worse arguments.
Well, this I guess he's a man, whatever his name is. He's just using the same old tropes. Well, Russia's economy is the size of Spain's. We've heard that for years. He's got nothing, right? And as soon as, like Hodges, as soon as he's cornered, he starts throwing out like just insults.
He starts
And 'cause that's all they have
changing the
left. That's all they have
subject,
left.
doing everything he can, exactly, not to
That's
actually
all
deal.
deflection. That's all they have left.
These other guys, I can't take them serious. Okay, well, I mean, listen.
I can't take him seriously.
Yeah.
You know, like
say that you can't take me seriously, but you just completely you have no response to the argument. Listen, the current estimate I've seen that Russia's GDP is about $2 billion a year. Try to keep perspective on this. That is less than a third. Is Spain a great power that we should respect? Is Italy a great power that we should respect?
Well, are we all missing? Okay, let me bring the elephant in the room into the debate. Nobody's
all right.
They don't want him to finish his good point.
Russia has. That's what we to any of these other countries. Russia on its own has more nukes than any other country, including the United States.
Okay, well, anyway, I'd say that's probably okay. Now, so that was Ben Hodges being taken to town, right? And listen, he's not backing up. He's not apologizing for being a freaking idiot who was wrong about everything, right? That's not what's happening here. He's basically still on the on his
Hodges. Go ahead.
Well, he's still on his old bit, right? He hasn't stopped.
Well, if you notice though, Hodges, he completely checked out of the conversation. Like he started checking his phone messages on live TV while the rest are, because he knows that he's just been so beaten down. He doesn't want to get back in the conversation.
I think he feels really disrespected. I think he got triggered, got a little bit disrespected. That guy was being a little bit, I think he was being overboard. You thought he was taking him to town, and he probably does deserve it. You're probably right. You know, I mean, look, he gets paid. This guy's a general who has done warmongering. He's done more damage to the United States security, the security of the nation, you know.
Yes, Hodges, I agree, was disrespected, but he also feels foolish because he just got taken to task by some YouTuber and made look a fool. And as soon as he got the opportunity to get out of that conversation, he did, and he never went back in. Like he didn't want to have anything to do with Dave Smith or that Andrew guy. He didn't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole, and that told me that he knew he was beaten.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I got one more.
Everybody, when you have a chance, go back when you know you've got an upgrade from Bradley's 56.6 modem.
Oh man, dude!
Go back and rewatch the whole thing. It's a great interview, I thought.
Yeah, maybe we should post the interviews, the links to the interviews in our notes, whatever. But okay, like the last one. Yeah, dude, 56.6K modem. I remember using those.
I remember 14.4.
Jeez, I remember 33. That's what I don't remember anything before that. I mean, I remember the era where 1 megabit per second internet was considered like blazing fast. So, I mean, to me, I'm just old school about that. I think, you know, my internet, I mean, it's a blazing fast for the 90s.
Would you think the United States will resume support to Ukraine at some point, or is that off the table now?
No, I think they will. Well, I think that this is a bit of a bargaining ploy. It's a very serious one because there are billions and billions still in the pipeline. By the way, also billions and billions that need to be spent in the United States to replenish our own stocks. Much more of that, frankly, than what is in the pipeline. But as I mentioned, the key is that there are certain capabilities that only the U.S. can provide to Ukraine, and that really
sounds great all of a sudden.
Although in many other areas, that is certainly possible.
Just like that.
So some have speculated that the U.S. actually loses leverage by cutting off aid, but you don't quite see it that way?
Well, I think if there is a sense that you can get that assistance flowing again, if you take certain actions, and I think Ukraine has definitely gotten the message on that,
then I think that is considerable leverage, yes. And it can be considerable leverage as well when it comes to getting Ukraine to accept whatever the terms of the ceasefire are. Though I frankly agree with President Zelensky that a critical element that needs to identify is what the guarantee be. Keep in mind that when Russia launched this in the first place, there had been something called the Budapest Memorandum.
So about the security guarantee, and right now he's going to talk about the Budapest Memorandum. So the Budapest Memorandum, what happened was the Ukrainians agreed to give Russia back their nuclear weapons, because these were the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons, right? The successor state to the Soviet Union was the Russians, right? Was the Russian Federation. And so the Russians took back their nuclear weapons from all these different places. And that was the right thing to do, because we were paranoid about, who the hell knows, these corrupt, tiny little militaries might sell this stuff off somewhere to someone, right? And so the Budapest Memorandum, the Ukrainians got certain security guarantees. And so they love to trot this thing out, because what happened is they did, now they say, well, we give us back our nukes, right? Because the Russians broke their word on these security guarantees. But what nobody points out is that we broke our word on the security guarantees first. It's been a while since I read them, but if you read the Budapest Memorandum, like it addresses like security concerns and in soft power influence as well. So we definitely broke the Budapest Memorandum first. The people that cheated first on the Budapest Memorandum was us, right? We're going to always point to the Russians because the Russians did invade. That's true. But by doing Maidan, by doing that coup, by flooding the country with money, by overthrowing the government, we broke the Budapest Memorandum. Anyway, let's go.
Signed decades earlier, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, in which the US, UK, and Russia assured Ukraine that we would be there to help secure them if they gave up the nuclear weapons that were still on their soil when the USSR collapsed. Everyone agreed to that. The nuclear weapons were dealt with. That didn't help them in 2014 when Russia occupied Crimea and parts of the southeastern part of the country known as the Donbass. There were additional agreements following that, many of them spearheaded by European leaders, especially Chancellor Merkel at the time. That didn't help him a whole heck of a lot in February 2022 when the full-on invasion was launched by Russia. So I think it's fair. It's imperative.
Still talking about the full-on invasion.
Really, for President Zelensky to ask what will be the security guarantee. We've heard some encouraging words, very impressive words actually, from Prime Minister Starmer of the UK, President Macron, and others who have committed to putting boots on the ground. But I still haven't heard what they're actually going to give the mission to these units that are on the ground, and in particular, how they would respond if Russia breaks the ceasefire. That is the key. And no one yet has provided the answer to that. And in truth, by the way, they're also using the term peacekeeping. There isn't any peace to keep in Ukraine if Russia stops attacking and stops its offensive operations on the ground. This is not the former Yugoslavia where you had three warring factions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I spent a year of my life, by the way, as the chief of operations of the NATO force there, and then also chased war criminals and terrorists with a U.S. hat. It's not Haiti, where I also served as chief operations, albeit for a UN force, where there were very serious criminal elements and gangs that needed to be suppressed in order to
very serious criminal elements and gangs.
Pause for a second. So the guy is giving us his resume of all of these global failures that he's been a part of.
And we're supposed to be impressed.
Yeah, like, well, it's not like Haiti.
It reminds me of John Bolton saying, yeah, I planned coup d'etat, and they're like what? Like, Venezuela, I guess that was failure, though. That did not work. Like, oh yeah. But I planned the other coup d'etat that was successful, he did say.
The 80% of their country that they still control. It's really all about what will be done to Russia if it breaks the ceasefire. And it shouldn't, of course, be just kinetic response. It should be further reimposition, most likely then, of even more draconian financial and economic sanctions. Can I just follow on to the cost of securing Ukraine? The cost of not securing Ukraine will be much, much greater. That would be a catastrophe for Europe and NATO. And of course, we still are the leader of NATO. Been as a 1, 3, and 4-star general alone, served in NATO positions. And the U.S. foundation to any NATO operation is critical.
Yeah, you're right, dude. He can't stop talking about his resume.
And then beyond that, as Andrew Roberts and I repeatedly mentioned in our book, Conflict, the Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Gaza, we observe that what you do in one part of the world influences perceptions in other parts. And if we were not to continue to help Ukraine in its hour of need, a country that shares our values and principles and so forth, what would that effect be out in the Indo-Pacific region? Would people see our unwillingness to help Ukraine as an indicator of what might happen out in the Indo-Pacific if there was a threat out there.
I wonder what you think the U.S. should ask of Russia in trying to come to an agreement over in these peace negotiations.
First and fundamental, obviously, is to stop shooting into Ukraine on a nightly basis. These glide bombs, ballistic missiles, hundreds of drones
Stop winning.
every 24
Stop
hours.
winning, we'll tell them. Just stop winning.
Yeah, and surely they will stop. They will be intimidated.
Well, again, it's the hubris, right? I go back to what I said earlier. The two children are fighting, and we're just going to let them have their fun. But if it gets too serious, we can always come in. That's what this clown is saying. And
yeah, I think this is still a bargaining phase. I think this is the part where he realizes there's nothing that we can do, but he's still bargaining. Like, we have still some influence, and you know what? We're going to do this thing, and if not, that's what I don't know, maybe.
Well, it's the facade. It's the Wizard of Oz.
This does sound a lot like much more copium to me. This is like clear and sheer copium.
Well, it's just pulling the levers, trying to make it think like everybody still believes in the big bad wizard. The problem is nobody does. So he just looks more and more a fool every day.
I might mention, stop the offensive on the ground. There's other demands that should be placed. Some are going to be for negotiating leverage. And I'm a little uncomfortable again that we haven't made Russia give up something to get some of these that we might have held them to. At the end of the day, though, really, I think it does come back to the security guarantee. And I'd really want to know, especially if I were in President Zelensky's shoes or those of his senior officials and military leaders, what will that guarantee consist of?
Without those guarantees, doesn't that just embolden China with its own sovereignty claims, whether it's Taiwan or elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific? Getting to your earlier point.
Well, it could very easily undermine deterrence. Keep in mind that deterrence is a function of two elements. One is the potential adversary's assessment of your capabilities. The other is the assessment of your willingness to employ those capabilities. And for deterrence in the Indo-Pacific to be rock solid, noting that there are other elements that should come into the equation as well, but it's the military that is the foundation of deterrence. There should be no doubt about our capabilities, noting, by the way, that we need to transform more rapidly. And if the new administration, still new administration, is able to carry out rapid change in how we procure systems and so forth, that would be
Listen to this guy.
Significant.
He's saying in the same sentence that we've got the most powerful military in the world that needs to this massive transformation and investment. So even the two statements within his own sentence are counter to one another. So if you actively listen to what he's saying, he makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And his football is deflated. It's really bothering me. Keep I don't know why. Keep going.
Well, this is it. But yeah, dude, that is what's so freaking hilarious is that
like take anything like Petraeus, the one thing I took out of that clip was right under his name, KKR. And that's where he works now. It's one of the biggest investment firms in the world, and they focus heavily on military chaos. Like they're really big into the military game. They're really big into the military reconstruction game. Mm-hmm. So that's where Petraeus is coming from. He's another one of these, ghouls who is a whore for money.
Let's, and I had other generals queued as well, like Hamish to Brent Gordon and other military, so-called professionals, right? But like, take a look at how bad this analysis was. They say like a broken clock is like wrong twice a day. This is worse than a broken clock, because if you were just taking random people off the street, and you were asking them, what do you think? What do you think? Are the Russians really fighting with shovels? You think that it's really happening that way? I think that you'd have a lot of percentage of people that would be like, yeah, that does sound a little odd. I don't know how much I believe that this is what's happening, right? Even if there's a lot of stuff that you could sell people on, there's a lot of stuff that I think people were still not totally buying into the narrative. And you could tell because they were censoring it hard. And they were like, I'd been kicked off of Twitter multiple times for pointing out obvious things like Bucha, that Bucha was a false flag, perpetrated by Ukrainian, by Kraken, by pointing things out like this, I would like people would be getting in trouble. You were not allowed to bring this narrative up at all, right? And now we're in a point where these people they don't skip a beat. You notice they didn't point out, yes, I was super wrong, right? There's none of that. What did they say? Well, they say they're on the next thing, and it's still delusional. They're like, yeah, we're going to need to do these security guarantees. This was a day ago when this video came out. So security guarantees, excuse me, we already saw what happened with Donald Trump talking about those security guarantees. I guess we're coming up on our hour and a half. Let's do our 2 scoops here.
Yeah, can I just close off though?
Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, I think that what this shows, and I'm glad we did this little hindsight retrospective, it just shows how badly we were all propagandized over the last few years. Now, you know, people like Bradley and I, we've been following this really closely, so we didn't buy into it because we knew the truth. Like you could see the videos, you could see everything, you could follow the front lines. So if you just did like
just watch DPA, if you just watch DPA,
just watch DPA. If you just did a modicum of your own independent research, you probably would have figured out pretty quickly that, you know, the situation wasn't what they were saying. But we in the West, we bought into all of this propaganda that we were fed on CNN and BBC. And now the chickens have come home to roost because people are waking up to the reality that, frankly, they were lied to for 3 years.
You know, what happened? I thought we were winning. I thought we were winning the war, you know?
Exactly. And now the irony of it all is you've got Ursula von der Vampire, who is now looking for $800 billion plus your children's lives to go fight a war that, frankly, nobody wants. Like the Russians don't want it. The Europeans don't want it. The only people who seem to want it are the elites. So if you're in Europe,
I've heard Levon Guzdaev call her Ursula Bursula. Like it.
So if you're in Europe, I want to show this clip because I don't think we've shown this battle clip before. If you're in Europe right now and you're in Poland, for example, where they announced that they were going to what they say that they were announcing all men are going to have to undergo military training now. That was announced today. They're starting to militarize and they're starting to recruit your sons. And this is what's going to happen to your sons if you go to war with the Russians. So I just want everybody to know that war, this is what it looks like. Can you hit that clip?
This one.
The fucking trap. Get down! Where?
Oh man. Yeah, we're definitely going to get in trouble for this video. Holy crap. Oh my god.
So that's what war looks like for you people in Poland. If you happen to be watching this, that's what you're going to face if you get mobilized. So I think everybody
was that in Ukraine?
That's in Ukraine. Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago. I found that.
So what is this? American mercenaries then? American?
Yeah,
because that guy sounded like American.
Yeah, that's 2 dead American mercs, and it'll be dead Polish mercs. It'll be dead Spanish mercs. It'll be dead French mercs. It'll be dead German mercs. It will be dead sons because that's what Russia does when you mess with them. So before you sign up for Ursula von der Vampire and her $800 billion plan to, number one, make you all poorer, it's also going to kill you. So I think if you're in Europe right now, you got to protest. You got to do something because the elites, they want to send you to the war. So
yeah, you got to do a look. We can see Georgia is putting up a fight. Romania is putting up a fight. Right? We can see that the people get it to a large extent. You know. Okay, let's do our 2 scoops here. We're okay. We've already done the Ursula Bursula. Let's see. We just did that one. Here we go. I guess this must be it.
You're not coming over here. You're not.
All right. So this is a lady who is having an argument with her parrot. So if you've never had a bird, they are literally they can have the intelligence of toddlers, especially like a little bit bigger ones like this. I've never had one of these. I forgot what they're called, but they're definitely extremely intelligent, and they have the emotional intelligence of toddlers.
Look, you're not coming over here.
They're easily more like emotionally more mature than dogs usually. Like I have a better understanding.
You're not. Don't do Bentley, watch out. I gotta put my feet up. Hey, get out of here! Ah! Well, stop! Why do you want to fight? Why do you want to? Why do you want to fight tonight? Hey, I brought you home toys and a skateboard. Hey, quit! Preston, no! What? Hey, you're acting like a cracked chicken. You're
like a cracked chicken.
You're acting like I'm not running.
Dude, I think he does not like to be called a cracked chicken. If something tells me he hears that, he's like, no, I am not a cracked chicken.
You're acting like a cracked chicken. That's it.
There's a skateboard. There's a toy.
Highest bidder gets you tonight. You're out of here. You're out of here. I can't stand you tonight.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, dude, it's literally like a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. If you've never had birds, they can do this way. It's much more entertaining and it's much more cute when they're doing that, something like this, instead of like tearing off their feathers or engaging in self-harm, because parrots can do stuff like that too. So this definitely has a good rapport with its owners to have throw a temper tantrum and do it that way, and go a little bit aggro and stuff like that. He definitely has he knows and has a high degree of like trust with them, to be able to do that. So that's pretty, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty entertaining. Yeah, I've had a lot of birds, and they're a lot of work, especially kind of bigger ones. They take a lot of.
Alrighty, well, hope everybody enjoyed that. I thought it was kind of cute. Anyway,
yeah, that was really cool.
I guess we'll wrap up. Europe, write your elected members of parliaments or whatever things you got going on over there. Write your elected members. Tell them you oppose any
Come
wars.
out. Yeah, fight for the war to stay far away from home. You don't want this to happen. People always say, well, if you want peace, prepare for war. Well, if you want war, what do you do? Prepare for peace? What do you do? What if you want war? Then you prepare for war as well. So if people are trying to prepare you for war, how do you know they're trying to prepare you for war, or they're trying to prepare for peace? Don't trust for that. Don't fall for that. If you want war, prepare for war. I know that for sure. If you want peace, maybe there's a discussion to be had where we can find something that doesn't trigger a security dilemma.
Yeah. Bottom line, if you take anything away from this episode, take away the fact that you've been lied to. They're coming for your children, and your children will end up dead like those two if they go to war. And I don't know how to make it any more.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. They'd be snatching up everybody out there. They even be snatching up grandpas in Ukraine. Look at that. That you think that's not in store for you? The Ukrainians thought that they were better than Afghanis too, but obviously. Yeah. But okay, so I guess that's our episode 16, and thank you very much for everybody for joining us for this episode of Hell in a Handbasket. We'll see you guys on hopefully open mic. I've been really busy over the days that open mic happens, so hopefully we'll see you on open mic. If not, see you in another episode again. Peace.
All right, cheers, guys.